I'm Mark Bouris and this is Straight Talk.
At one stage, I was using $1,500 a day of heroin.
Russell Manser is a survivor.
A perpetrator's greatest weapon is his victim's silence and shame.
I came from the mud.
He tucked away his demons and lived a life of robbing banks across Sydney during the 80s. Until eventually found himself serving time in prison. But those demons grew even louder.
You know, I went through the notorious Darrick Boys Home. I also, at 16 years old, I was sent to Long Bay Prison, and I was sexually abused in both these places. I'm a big believer in a problem shared is a problem halved, but I'd like to think that I'll be part of a system that can change all that, where they get what they deserve. I'm creating my own justice by talking about it.
Russell Manser, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's a dead set pleasure to be here. One of my favourite podcast series.
Thanks, mate. Okay. Straight Talk's about us talking about things that, generally speaking, people don't talk about. But to kick it off, I think let's just put a baseline there. What is Russell Manser doing right now?
Oh, mate, I'm passionate about helping survivors of institutional sexual abuse. I think being a survivor myself, I know the problems that it caused me, and and the problems it was causing me until I got the proper treatment to deal with it. Just a bit of a background on my own. I got sentenced. I stole a car when I was a 14-year-old kid, and that was just misguided and misled. Ended up in a notorious Darrick Boys Home, which is the subject of a 60-minute story, and there was prolific sexual and physical abuse there, and I didn't escape it. So started a trajectory of drug abuse and an escalation of crime. And institutional abuse could be anything from a boys' home, girls' home, Catholic school, private school, any type of churches of all denominations, foster care, fax docs, anything when it is an expectation of a person or people to make sure that child's safe.
So now your business or your foundation or your organisation is a place where victims of sexual abuse in institutions, whatever the institution be.
Yeah. They come through us and they seek out compensation, and obviously one of the big things is apology letters from the institution that took part in covering up the abuse. We provide wraparound support. We make sure they're being treated by dignity and respect, and not being robbed by unscrupulous lawyers. And everyone knows the law game. There's a lot of unscrupulous people in them sort of things that'll take advantage. We're making sure they're not being taken advantage again. We oversee that from the point of making sure they've got support through any sort of contact with barristers, lawyers, psychiatrists, psychologists. We go to mediation with them. We actually take the initial statement. We create a safe place where they feel comfortable of telling their story of abuse, what happens. And it's reported by the lawyers themselves that they have a tendency of talking to us a lot more freely and a lot more easily about what happened to them than they would with a lawyer that's got a suit and a collar on, a tie on.
Sitting behind a desk.
Yeah, sitting behind a desk.
In chambers.
Yeah, in chambers. It's not a comfortable place.
It's a scary joint. It was like an institution in itself.
For sure.
So your organisation, let's say someone was abused, let's say 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
They come to you and you sort of project manage them, I guess, in some respects, through the process.
Yeah.
Do you direct them into lawyers?
What we do is we'll find a law firm, like not all law, like there's certain law firms that might have runs on the board for certain institutions. Someone, say for instance, Darrick Boys Home, Mount Penang Boys Home, I'd have 3 or 4 lawyers that I'd have a tendency of sending because they've got runs on the board for getting results from those institutions. Might be Boys Town, the Boys Town, Ref Downey in Queensland and Engadine in New South Wales. There'd be other law firms that would have good runs on the board, good form, and good figures for getting results for them sort of clients, and good treatment too, which is first and foremost for us. You know what I mean? I say this, they've got to treat them with dignity and respect. If they don't, we'll move them somewhere else.
There's been a lot being said. We recently saw a UFC fighter talk about how his friend had committed suicide because he wasn't prepared to go and tell his story, and that was only the last couple of weeks. Is it prevalent amongst, let's call them victims for the moment, they hold on to this guilt or
That's shame, Mark. It's shame.
shame
That's
or
shame. That's what
all
it
their
is.
life.
It is. On average, it takes 30 years for a male to come forward and tell their story. On average, and I say this, one of the things I talk about to survivors, and that's what I call them, survivors, is a perpetrator's greatest weapon is his victim's silence and shame, you know. And for myself, I carried a backpack of stuff that didn't belong to me. That's the shame itself, the guilt, embarrassment, and a whole heap of anger that were just self-destructive sort of feelings and behaviors, you know what I mean? So when I tell my story, and I like to share, and I like to do a lot of podcasts, and I like to get my story out as much as with the hope that I can put a survivor at ease to tell their story, because it's a healing process. The more I tell my story, the more I heal. So a lot of them carry this off, you know, in particular. I didn't tell my story. I was abused at the age of 14, 15 the first time. And I didn't tell my story, and say that was 1982, and I didn't tell my story until 2014.
Wow.
To the Royal Commission. I was told, it's a funny story, Mark. I was on a plane on the way to Perth, and I was reading a book called Sleepers, an old scallywag in prison.
I remember the movie.
Yeah, great movie. Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm reading this book on the way plane to Perth, and it was about Sleepers is about a movie about kids that got abused in an institution, and they go and square up on the abusers.
And they did, as a result of doing a really stupid prank.
Yeah.
They actually end up killing someone.
Yeah, they pushed a trolley down a set of stairs and a prank, and it killed some. So I was reading this book, and this bloke looked over my shoulder, and he goes, "Oh, that's a great book, that." And for some reason, I just squirted it out, and I said, "Yes, the story of my life." And he goes, "Really, really?" And he sort of leant forward and he had a bit of a chat to me. He told me it was from the Royal Commission Institution Responses to Child Sexual Abuse. I said, "What's that entail?" And he told me what it was about. So he just planted a seed. Nothing come of it there and then. And he planted a seed in my head. And long story short, I ended up getting – the last bank I robbed was in 2014. The party was over, but I kept on turning up under 10. And that's basically the theory of robbing banks. They were gone by then. There was no money in them. All the security measures in the world. I think I got 10 grand out of it. And I got tackled by a bunch of super citizens as I come out. And it was funny, you know, one bloke said to me, one of the super citizens said, "I most probably just saved your life." And I went to the Southport Wash House on the Gold Coast, and it was really funny, you know, all these young coppers were coming out. It was like they'd seen a Tasmanian tiger for the first time. It was that ancient, bank robbers, you know, and they're all coming peeping through windows and having a look. They'd never seen a bank robber before. And there was an old cop in there. It was funny. It was like a movie scene. And I went in, they said, "Mate, you got to, you know, do a record of interview. It would be the best thing you've ever done." And this old cop, I just knew how this was going to react. And this old cop was looking at me, sort of nodding at me, knowing what my reaction was going to be. And I said, "I've never seen anyone moonwalk back into Brisbane saying that fucking record of interview was the best thing I've ever done," you know. And the cop, he just started laughing. He goes, "I knew that was your reaction," you know what I mean? And I winked at him. I said, "Let me get out of here," you know. Went to Arthur Gorrie Correctional Centre on remand, and I had every intention, Mark, I had every intention of knocking myself. I was just so badly beaten, and I had the plan, and the plan was to use a coaxial cable for the TV to hang myself with. I was just gone. I was gone, and I'd really made comfort with that. I'd really made comfort with it. I was like, "Yeah, sweet, I'll just leave a note, let me kids know that I love them," and I mean, because I was just sick and tired of hurting people, and in particular myself, I was just in a world of pain. And I got to the cell that night, and the coaxial cable had been cut down by someone because prisoners are so ingenious. They'd use a coaxial cable to make a lighter somehow, putting it in the power point, getting a spark to light a cigarette. So it'd been cut down. It wouldn't wrap around my toe. And so the next morning I wake up and the bloke's at my window. They've got like a 30-metre centre window on your door, a display window, so they can come and check on you at night. And he offered me drugs. He said, "You want this? It'll put you." He goes, "I know me and you have never seen eye to eye in the past." He said, "You want?" He said, "I'll give you this to sort of, make a peace deal." And I banged on the window. I suspected this bloke was a sex offender. And I banged on the window. I said, "No matter how bad I was going in life," I said, "no matter how bad I felt," and I said, "I couldn't take a thing off you, you know." And I just didn't realise what was going on here. And then I walked out the cell and I went downstairs, and down on the table was a young bloke doing a psych degree, had his books out doing a psych degree. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I took your advice all those years ago. And he said, I've got in education. I'm doing a psych degree. And he looked me up and down. And I remember the look he gave me, this kid, just as clear as day. And he looked me up and down as the state I was in. And he said, maybe you should take a bit of your own advice, and then went back to his studying. And then my mate called me out, who was a lawyer, and he said, you're in a bit of trouble. I said, I'm going to get 20 years. And he said, third time up, bank robber. Third time I would have been convicted for a bank robbery. And I weren't going to beat that one, and he said, mate, I reckon I'll give you 3 or 4 years. And I said, I'll do that in a heartbeat. So back on the way home from the education, on the way from the legal, I dropped in the education block, and I said, what's available? And they said a course called tertiary prep, and it's like a HSC. And they said, what'd you like to study? I said, I like to study law. I'd like to be able to help people. And they said, all right, we'll get you signed up to do tertiary prep. So within it was just the irony of all of this is within 24 hours, and I talked to these people who've got suicidal thoughts. In the course of 24 hours, things had happened to me that just, and I got back to the cell that night. I didn't want to kill myself because morally, I still had something in the tank that I wouldn't take something off some person who was a sex offender. I'd done something in the past to change a kid's life and change his trajectory from, being offending behaviour to getting into education. I weren't going to get that long, and I could possibly do something that could help people with the law or something to do with that sort of thing.
So right at that point, you felt inspired that your whole world hasn't caved in because you weren't going to do 20 more years. How old were you then?
Oh, I was about 46.
Okay, so you weren't going to be stuck in there for maybe 20 years.
Yeah.
You would regain some hope.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, it sounds like when you think you're going to do 20 years, you've made a decision to knock yourself. You don't have anything to look forward to. You hadn't even thought about doing a course at that stage. You didn't even know if you could do a course, what you would apply the course to, as opposed to that is helping people. So you didn't feel motivated or inspired, or you didn't see that sort of, light coming through, a bit of hope out there, at which point you thought, fuck this, I'm just going to neck myself. And by the way, it's pretty common.
Yeah.
That's a common thing, blokes necking themselves. Who, in your case, do you think that necking yourself, though, was not about loss of hope, but just all the demons that had built up over however many years, particularly going back to when you were 14 and 15 when you were being abused? Do you think those demons were tapping you on the shoulder saying, Russell, it's time to go?
Yeah, 100%, Mark. You're right.
Is that what you were struggling with?
100%. It was the underlying issue of the drug abuse. It was the underlying, because, man, I had a stage at one stage when I was 12 years clean, and I built, I had a marketing and advertising business. It wasn't like it was all lost, but it was always the underlying issue. It was still the nightmares, waking up at 2:00 in the morning and cold sweat and sort of stuff like that. I never dealt with it. It was the underlying issue. It was this thing that wasn't going away. And I was just never going to go away until it was dealt with.
Our generation were never actually asked to talk about shit. Like, if there's something bothering you, you would like, be man, fucking aim up.
Two feelings, good and bad.
Get on with it.
How are you feeling? Oh, good. How you feeling? Bad. There's no in between.
Nothing in between. And by the way, I don't really want to know about what's causing your problem. Because I've got to go to work.
I've got my own problems.
Yeah, I've got my own problems, and don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And no one gave us permission to talk about it when we were growing up. Anyway, what was it? When did you first break it?
I was sitting in my cell one night, and I was watching the ABC 7:30 report, and I seen that they were going after Brian Houston from Hillsong, and I seen that the Royal Commission Institution Responses to Child Sexual Abuse were going after George Pell, and I thought, these people are a fair income. And I just thought, you know what? Because I just knew it was the underlying. When I got that suicidal thoughts, I just got back to the core. It was like I peeled the onion back until it couldn't be peeled back anymore, so to speak. And there was nothing left, and that's what it was. It was just sitting there, and it was this rotten black hole of a thing. It was abuse. It was like a pea that was just turned into a whole heap of things. And that was what I had to deal with. And I just knew it. I acknowledged that was the problem. But it's like being trapped in a maze or without, a sort of plan to get out of there. I acknowledged it, but I didn't have the plan to get out of there, and I needed a plan. So what I'd done was I jumped on the phone. I can remember it as plain as day. It was in January 2014. So I went and jumped on
So you were in jail at the time?
Yeah, I was in jail. I was in jail in Brisbane. And
in Wagga Road.
No, it's called Arthur Gorrie. Boggle Road's been closed since 1986.
Serious?
Yeah,
I didn't know
Mark, you're
that.
out of date with
I know,
the jails,
I'm out of date. That's a worry. That's a good thing, though.
That is a good thing.
Yeah.
But I got my friend to get me, I said, can you get me the Royal Commission's address? And they said, yeah. And I rang back an hour later, give me the address. And I just wrote a one-page foolscap paper of what had happened to me. And like anything, I didn't have a lot of faith. I didn't have a lot of faith in the
system.
In the system, so to speak. I didn't, especially anything to do with the government.
You thought no one's going to read this.
Yeah, and this will just get put in the shredder or put on someone's desk. I said, but it might be a little bit cathartic for me to do that and put it out and just give it away or burn it or whatever, you know.
But what did you say in it? Like,
I just outlined, I said, my name's Russell Manser. I said, I went through, I said I was at the notorious Darrick Boys Home. I also was at, another part of my story is that at 16 years old, I was sent to Long Bay Prison as a 16-year-old, and I was sexually abused in both these places. And I don't even think I filled the whole page. And then, so I posted it. And then in prison, when you get called for a legal visit, two things, not much ever good comes of that. It's normally the police turning up to charge you with something. So a lot of people turn up there and that you stand up there like a deer in the headlights, so to speak, and you go, who is it? And as the police, I don't want to tell them to call my lawyer and you run out of there. Yeah. And then, but in this case, they said it's the Royal Commission. And oh,
really? They come to see you?
No, they by video conference.
Right.
And I remember the woman's name. Her name was Michelle Burford. And so anyway, I went and she goes, Russell, firstly, we want you to tell you something. Before you even start, we want to tell you we believe you. And I said, believe me, what? And they said, what happened to you? And they said, we've even got a bit of information that backs up what you say. So other people that were in my situation had obviously dropped my name as someone that was been there. And I said, yeah. And I had this like 45-minute conference with them, and I just was so at ease. And I was a bit emotional. But at the end of it, they said, we got a trauma counselor. I was a little pommy woman. And I ended up doing counselling with her for 5 years. Never met her face to face, but spoke to her on a regular basis for.
I can see he's getting to you now.
Yeah, it is.
You're right.
Yeah, I'm sweet. Yeah, I've done this 1,000 times now. Like I tell it, but it still has the same effect to me. It still has. It is because,
what is the thing? Is it the memory of what happened to you? Is it the injustice of what you feel? Or is it having to talk to someone that affects you the most?
It's not the injustice, because I think in a lot of ways I'm creating my own justice by talking about it. I think I mightn't have got justice at the time. Unfortunately, the perpetrators in my case are long gone, but long gone. But I don't know. I just I was a very, very. It's not so much these days, but it was a very, very painful part of my life, and I carried a lot of pain with me for a long time that I didn't deserve to carry. I didn't deserve to carry.
No one deserves to carry, do they?
No.
Especially if you're a young man. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're an older man either, but as a young man.
Oh, mate. You know what? And then you sit there and watch news and you see some perpetrator get 3 or 4 months or a slap or a suspended sentence or whatever. And mate, I'd be raging sometimes, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, that hasn't changed. But I'd like to think that I'll be part of a system that can change all that, where they get what they deserve, because it's like they create so much carnage. They create the next heroin addicts, drug addicts, bikies. They create the next prostitutes, strippers. They create so much carnage in this country. And it's not, unfortunately, the politicians and the courts don't recognise the damage that they cause.
Is that an example of because they just don't have any understanding
I think it's
of the effect on somebody? I mean, do you think that's what it is, or do you think that they don't give a shit?
I've got a theory on it. I think, the court, it's sort of like a stimulus. I think they sort of, they understand that keeps them in business. The judges in business, keeps the cops. There's a thing, I think it's in social science, it's called the mink coat theory, right? So mink coat gets built, grown, and they kill a mink or whatever, and they make the coat. Gets sold for $4,000. If it gets stolen, it generates $40,000. Because you've got to have the police, you've got to employ the police to chase the person who stole it. Then you've got to have the judges, and then you've got to have the prison officers, and then the parole officers. It creates a stimulus.
Yeah.
And I think perpetrators, create that stimulus too, because they create a lot of carnage. They create a lot of criminals. they create a lot of bad people. Like a lot of people, like I have through my business, Voice of a Survivor, some of the most violent men in this country were really badly abused. And I think, the underlying issue of their violence is often the abuse itself. Now, we eliminate the trauma of the abuse and you've actually got a normal guy that hasn't got the propensity for violence. The violence itself is a byproduct of the abuse. They just act out and that's how they act. Some people, in my case, I just numb myself. At one stage, I was using $1,500 a day of heroin. $1,500 a day.
Do you use it to numb the pain, to forget, or what are you trying to do? If there's escapism, what is it?
Escapism, numb. Man, and people used to say to me about the way I use drugs, I lived on the edge of death. Like people could have a shot of heroin and just, I was trying to get right on that edge of the precipice of death and be, because that's how numb I wanted to be. It was like, and I've had a lot of other heroin addicts. They said, mate, we've never seen people use it like you. And in that case, I'd had a lot of overdose. I overdosed on a plane going to Perth once. And I woke up with an earful of pumpkin. I had my meals on there and I'd had a shot and I walked out and went, bang, overdose. I was always that numbing effect, like, because shame and embarrassment's a really horrible thing to deal with. It's a really, really horrible, especially when it's flowing around in your head. Like it is, it's like it's a really cold, and it's like, and combine that with anxiety. Your head's not a good place to be with that's all that's running around in your head, and you're not thinking clear. You're not seeing the beautiful beach. You can be at the beach, and all you've got in your thoughts is running around this shame and embarrassment like a mouse wheel. So it's a horrible place to be. So when you take the drugs, then thoughts stop. And you can sort of get a bit of a grasp that you're at the beach, or you're in a nice forest, or you're driving along a nice, you're seeing some nice scenery. You get a bit of it sort of brings you back to normality. It sort of numbs. When people talk about that numbing, it takes away what's going on in your head and sort of brings you back to what's going on sometimes.
There's been a lot written and talked about, and more recently about the effect of psychedelics. Yeah, did you ever try that type of thing to try in a remedial sense? I don't mean just for fun. But did you ever try psychedelics to try and or microdosing, whatever it is, to try and heal the anxiety that you suffered from as a result of these things that happened to you when you were a kid?
I'll tell you something. I got invited by this group of people down at Albury Wodonga a few months ago. And I just, through my own studying, through my business, I always want to improve how people are treated. I research a lot of it. So I went down there and they were a group of people, and they'd done the psychedelics, and then they walked into this national forest. So I'll give it a go, and I said, I don't want too much of it. And man, it was like, what it done for me was, it allowed me to see my thoughts from the outside, like from an outside. Yeah, step back and see my thoughts, and it was just amazing. And my nephew's been trying to tell me. My nephew lost both his mum and dad, my brother and his wife, through suicide, and he's just been telling me about it for years. He said, "You got to give this a go, Uncle." And I just went and I said to people, I don't really, because I'm a recovering addict, I don't really want to try this and be addicted to it or anything like that. And they said, no. We don't do it for that effect. We do it for a complete different effect. And we're not trying to get you wiped out or anything like that, or numb or anything like that. And microdosing is what it is. It's a really small dose just to do it. And I'm a really big fan of it. I think I'm massive, especially when it comes to trauma, dealing with trauma. I think it's amazing.
Because I see Mike Tyson invested in a company in the US, which, along with other people, not just him, but a whole lot of people invest in a big company in the US, which is doing a lot of trials on microdosing of psychedelics, and for the purpose of healing, obviously not for any other purpose, not for recreational reasons, but for the purpose of healing, for people with anxiety, bipolar disease, depression, and PTSD, which is sort of probably...
Yeah, that's what I've got.
That's what you suffered from.
Yeah.
And they say, according to... Because I went and checked the website, and I've been following it quite studiously. They say that it has quite a big success rate, and they're trying to work out the science behind it and try and get it approved by the FDA, et cetera, in America. And that's why I asked you, have you tried microdosing? Because I know people here do it. I mean, I got invited.
It's all underground. It's all underground.
Yeah, no, totally. I got invited by somebody to do it up near where up Northern Rivers that way.
It's
and
massive up there.
I turned it down only because I actually am very curious to do it, very curious to try it for a whole number of personal reasons. But the reason I turned it down is because I wasn't sure of the supervision and the management of the process, the individuals who are doing it. And I was also worried, a little bit worried about if something went wrong, and whose hands am I in at the time? So I rejected it. But I just think it's something that anybody who's had any sort of unusual past, maybe we probably should have governments start to investigate this sort of stuff
100%.
and start roll this out for people, as an alternative.
I haven't heard, I'll be honest, I know of a lot of people. I've seen, I've been in a group that does it all. I haven't heard one bad result from it. Not one bad result. Everything I've heard is really, really positive. And I think the fact that it's micro, the operative word in this is micro. It's a small dose. We're not having large doses to wipe you. And I think that's the big difference, you know what I mean? And done right, I think, man, imagine getting scientists involved with it.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
Or getting it properly researched at the Mind and Brain Centre at Royal Prince Alfred or wherever the hell it is, out there at Camperdown. Get real neuroscientists and all those sorts of people getting involved in looking at this sort of thing to try and help most of us heal. Like everybody's has been somehow affected by something in their life, which to them is a trauma for them. I mean, the number of people who put up that post that I can't think of his name, the UFC fighter put up, like the number of guys I know who replayed it, especially a lot of fighters. Like a lot of blokes fight, box, UFC.
And I think a lot of times I look at fighters and what I've got to know is a lot of the reason why they fight is a lot of underlying issues of trauma itself.
No, 100%. Look, I can tell you that's my experience too. It's a way of dealing with shit in their life, and it stops them from getting angry because they can actually roll their anger out in the ring or training, and it sort of keeps them not numb, but sort of takes the edge off them.
I've looked at fighters. I can look at some fighters now. I reckon I can pick them through their eyes. That focus. There's a certain. I can pick a survivor. 10 people can walk down the street. There's 3 survivors. I'll tell you, I'll pick them all. I can read people's eyes. That's why I do works. Because I'm really good at being able to pick a survivor.
Do you think, Russell, your skill at doing that, is just a general skill as to being able to redeem yourself the way you have? Like, it's pretty crazy. I mean, like, you've done it. Do you think that's a skill that you picked up in the nick of in jail over all those years? I mean, how many years you spent in jail?
23.
23 years of your
in
life.
jail in 3 different states.
Yeah, so do you think it's a skill that you've developed as a result of being in jail? Like a certain edginess, a rawness around being around people where the rules are different and you have to have your wits about you all the time. You have to be able to learn to read people.
There's a few things, My brother's a businessman and I can pick a shifty person a mile away. My brother pulled me in a meeting one day and they said, we're just a bit sus on this guy. Can you jump in and read him? And within 5 minutes, I said, my brother, I said, don't do nothing with that bloke. I said, he's a shift. He's a day as long. Can pick shifty people.
But what do you look for? Do you know, is it a conscious thought or is it just
body language? I think their body language is.
Are you saying, look at this, look at that, tick, 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 or is it just a read you get generally?
How they react to questions. It's like I spoke to Gary. I'm friends with Gary Jubal and I asked him about the same thing. I said, do you read people through their body language? And he goes, I do that, but I also have evidence to substantiate what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so he being an ex-policeman or a detective, a highly ranked detective in the murder squad at one stage.
Yeah, homicide squad,
and so he would work on use his instincts. But what he's saying, he'd go and gather evidence to support
you have
it.
something backing it up. He said, you just can't base it on that alone. I reckon I could do it.
Yeah, so maybe just explain what it's like when you're sitting in prison and when you not the very first time you walk in, but when you walk in, what are you trying to do in relation to all the people in the particular jail that you might be at? What's your first thing?
Someone explained prison. When you walk into prison, a prison is described as a high intense social experience. Someone said to me that highly intense social experience, and I think you do because you walk through them doors and everyone, doors, gates or whatever, and everyone knows you're there. And there's a fair few people that have a lot of intel on you. And if you've got any secrets or skeletons in your closet, they'll come out within the first 5 minutes, because people are very confrontational in prison. Oh, you walk through the gate, and if someone's done something wrong, you done this wrong to old mate, you better get out of here. And like you get told you can't be in that prison. Like some blokes will grab your stuff and go somewhere else. So they got to go back to the screws and say, I can't be in there. Or you got your welcoming party. I'm from Mount Druitt, and
that's where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in Mount Druitt, and so we've normally got a reception committee when we walk through the door. It's always, there's the high population of Mount Druitt people in prison, and there's normally a reception committee. So I walk through the gate, and it's and they've got me lined up. They've told the screws what cell I'm living in. I'll go to a cell, and I'll actually be sharing a cell with another Mount Druitter. So, but for others, and what I found about prison, how the same water finds its own level. It's so much like that. You'll see the bank robbers will go and hang with the bank robbers. The drug importers will hang with. They just gravitate to each other. The fraudsters will go and hang with the fraudsters. It's just it's amazing. I sat back and watched, and I thought one day I was just sitting there, especially I was at Long Bay when that used to be the MRC. It's the remand centre, and I was watching all these crowds of blokes. Everyone sitting around. And it was funny that no one was out of place. No one was out of place. Everyone was with their tribe, so to speak.
It is very tribal. I mean, a friend of mine was telling me a little bit about it more recently. Friend / client, ex-client, I should say. And he told me that these days, it's much more scary than it ever was in the past.
100%. But I
particularly with you got your Indigenous groups, you've got your non-Indigenous groups, and you got your Asian groups, and you got
racial segregation.
It's quite heavy.
You know what it is though, Mark? I'll tell you something. What I noticed about, and I was thinking about this not so long ago. In the early 90s, in New South Wales in particular, they closed a lot of mental institutions like Rozelle Hospital, the one at Westmead, Morisset. They closed them all. Prisons then become a dumping ground for the mentally ill. Now, if you've got schizophrenics walking around in knives in prison, that's going to escalate because everyone else is going to aim up with knives. And I think that escalation in violence come around about the same time they closed all these mental institutions and started dumping them all into prison. I think because I was really fat. The point that you mentioned that about what your friend said, I sort of went back and I went back and thought about the process long and hard, and I went, why did that happen? Was it, rap music? You can't blame it on rap music, as the police are trying to do at the moment. You can't blame it on that, and you can't blame it on movies or anything like that. And I thought, you know what? There was a correlation between the dumping all the mentally ill patients into the prisons and an escalation in violence, because you've got people walking around that just they don't mean to. They've got a mental problem, and they'll just king hit someone, and then an old mate will turn back around. I've seen it happen. A bloke's doing chin-ups, and some mentally ill bloke just ran up and king hit him as he's come off it, and the bloke was just a schizophrenic, just hearing voices. I've seen a lot of that.
And how do you? And when you first walk in there, I mean, are you looking over your shoulder all the time?
Of course, yeah. And I still do it to a lot of degrees. I'm really big on awareness of what goes around. I mean, you always know what your position is. You always know who's behind you. That's big. Always know what's behind that. Like it's a safety mechanism.
You've been talking about walking around outside, like today.
Yeah, even today. I always have an awareness. I could be talking here, and I'm always looking over your shoulder to see who's behind you, because I'm watching your back, and I'm hoping you're watching mine. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
me and you want to engage in a conversation. And if you see a threat coming towards me, you say, hey, old mate's coming up behind you. He's looking a bit aggressive. Fucking be prepared. If you're talking to your mate, or there's an expectation if you're having a conversation with someone for them to mail you of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're always on guard, because you don't know. You don't know who's got problems with you. As I say, it could be a schizophrenic. It could be someone that's got some problem with him, that's had a bad day. He's had a bad phone call. He's angry, because that's what happens. Someone's wife leaves him or something like that. Old mate's on a war page. A rampage. He doesn't care who he's going to bash. He's just full of anger, because his wife's just left him. He's got 20 years to go. He's got no hope. He's full of anger. He's full of rage, and he's going to take it out on someone.
So the two alternatives, anger and rage, take it out on someone, that's alternative one. The second alternative, when you've got no hope. Second alternative is, I'm going to neck myself.
Yeah.
Are they the two alternatives?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think You went through both of those.
Oh, 100%.
Stage one, I bash everybody.
Yeah.
That was a point where it wasn't anger anymore. It was more despair.
Yeah.
Is there a bridge between the two? I mean, like, because it seems to me you're a great observer of life. That's what I think. I mean, one of the skills you probably got from being in jail for so long is you're a great observer of everything. You're aware of everything that's going on around you. You watch. I mean, when I saw you at the airport the other day, you clocked me like pretty quick, and we were just in a line. But I thought to myself when I got on the plane, you know,
Look, we'll sit next to each other basically.
yeah, well, you're cross, yeah. But I thought to myself when I was on the plane though, I was nowhere near as aware of what was going on as you were. And I'll tell you why I thought that. Because when we went through security, like the security, I had to take this watch off because for some reason this watch always shows up on me. So I take it off and always put it in the basket thing, and I put your phone and all that shit in there. You put it through the detector thing, and I got out. And when I was on the plane, I thought, "Where's my fucking watch?" And I'd been talking to you. You and I have been chatting.
I didn't take your watch.
No, I know. I got it on, though. I know you didn't take it watch. But we're in a long line. There's a lot of fucking people there, right?
Yeah.
And I was shitty. I was more shitty about how long it was all taking.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh, fuck this. And I was actually thinking about that. And I think we probably had, I can't remember. No, we didn't have masks on. But I was thinking about what was inside my head as opposed to my surrounds.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember that I took the watch out of the basket and put it in my bag.
Yeah.
And I couldn't quite remember. And when I got on the plane, I thought, Mark, you're a fucking idiot. Be more aware of your circumstances and be more self-aware.
Yeah.
I was pretty shitty with myself, because I went, oh, where's my fucking watch? Oh, I don't even left in the fucking basket. Like I thought, we'll have to get off the plane. I'm gonna have to ring because only the week before I left my earpods on the plane. Exactly the same thing happened.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I've got to become much more aware.
Yeah.
Now, it seems to me is that, I started thinking about you. I thought, blokes like Russell are super aware of everything that's going on around them.
Yeah.
Like I could be standing there and I could see, if I saw you and if I knew you, I could literally, and I think this is the case for lots of people, literally not know you're there.
Yeah. I'm hearing you.
Because I'm thinking about what's going on in my fucking head.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about where I got to go. I mean, I often get out of my car, don't turn my car off, don't lock it, and go off to where I'm going to leave my car running. And I'm wondering where people like you have probably suffered from PTSD, have been put into other institutions like jail, where you have to be aware of every single thing that's going on around you every minute of the day, all the time.
I lived in a war zone.
Yeah, I know, totally, and therefore you come out hyper aware.
Yeah,
hyper aware of everything.
Yeah,
it's actually a pretty good skill.
Yeah.
And do you think that's something now do you think that skill that you achieved allowed you to reflect on your own self and become hyper aware of what you were suffering? Is that the thing that got you to do something about it? That is, send the letter, then take up the offer of help when they offered you the help?
Yeah, 100%, Mark. And that's your awareness, see, and you point out because I didn't know that about myself.
Well, I'm only good. I'm doing this shit when I'm sitting in front of someone, and I'm concentrating on it. That's what I do. That's my job. But I become good at that.
Yeah.
But outside of here, I'll probably walk outside and my car will be still running. I get in, I've probably left it open.
I left your watch
at the
airport.
I left my watch at the airport. Someone's probably pinched all my gear out of the car. No, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
is that something that you've gained?
That awareness. I do have it. I spot things in people. But I also spot opportunities really well too, because prison shows you how to spot an opportunity.
Oh yeah, you got to be good at that.
I had a shop. in prison. I was sending my kids home $500 a week. So if you bought a bottle of Coke off me, you have to give me $2 back. You got a block of chocolate off me, you have to. I ran a blackjack table. I had every hustle, No. So I've seen these opportunities.
But that's how pay you survive, because that's your currency.
Yeah, for sure. And but that awareness of people, I see things in people. I see people's. Like I was speaking to a woman yesterday, and I said, like I was getting a dog off her, and I said, man, you'd be an amazing trauma counsellor. And she said, what? And she goes, it's funny you say that. She goes, because I thought about doing this type of work. I said, mate, you got this really good tone as a trauma counsellor. I said, just something you want to think about. I said, you got this amazing tone, and man, I'd feel comfortable talking to you if I was telling you what the worst things that ever happened to me. I said, just off your tone alone,
Well, I tell you where I'm leading with this, Russell. If for example, you suffered trauma when 14, 15, 16, but let's say you never robbed a bank or never did anything after that, you never went to jail. Let's say you worked on an office somewhere, whatever the job was, with the government, and you never got put in those hyper-aware situations and where it became second nature to you. Do you think maybe you may never have pulled out of the PTSD, the trauma that you suffered as a result of being abused, because you never developed enough awareness to actually drag yourself out of it? In other words, you might have been one of these poor bastards who are in an office for the whole life, traumatized by what happened, never spoke to anyone because you're a generational thing, and may have ended up necking yourself.
100%.
Maybe jail was a good thing for you in some respects.
Oh, without a doubt. I think there's certain things in there. I think jail has given me an ability to really weigh people up real quick. Their qualities, attributes, and if they're shifty, I think, especially in business. Oh, don't get me wrong, I've been caught out a couple of times in business. I've had people turn up, and I don't believe in reading CVs. I think they're a load of shit. I've seen blokes make out their doctors with dodgy certificates and everything. But I'm starting to realise a little bit different. You can get them people researched. I didn't. So I think my ability to read people through prison as one of my greatest assets in business, you know what I mean? And I think that there's a moral code in prison that, you don't tell on people, you don't hit up blokes, girls, wives, there's this moral code in prison, but there's a moral code in business too that you've got to apply yourself to. And I've applied myself to it really well. There's certain things. A big thing I'm into is exercise. It gives me a discipline. And it's the best antidepressant I've ever had. And a big way over the years of treating my post-traumatic stress disorder has been exercise. Man, I used to train 4 or 5 hours a day. I was training like I was training for the Olympics. But that was a form of escapism too.
I think it is, for sure.
Yeah, it was a form
I use it for escapism.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
But I also trick myself into thinking it's a good form of health, like to help your health. I mean, like, it is good for your health.
Yeah.
But I train probably too hard.
Yeah.
I don't need to train as hard as I do.
Yeah.
And but I do it to escape.
Yeah.
It's my moment, but it's a good form of meditation.
Oh, great.
And so this is like, so if you went to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, whatever they're called, and you had these issues, they'd probably say to you,
they want to medicate you.
Or go on and say, instead of medicate, let's meditate.
Yeah. Oh, that's been the best. Meditation. I went to
So you're doing meditation?
Oh, yeah, I do meditation. I went to through the work, because I'm exposed to a lot of trauma in my work, and I had a report written about me by Professor Ian Coyle, who's a leading trauma reporter in Australia, and he believed that he's never come across too many people that can work on the front line of trauma that are abuse survivors. He's only ever come across 2, and me and a woman called Hetty Johnson are the only 2 that can work in that field of trauma. Because I've done like 1,100 trauma reports. Like I've done about 1,100 trauma interviews where I've interviewed clients about what had happened to them, and I didn't think it was affecting me. And then the last one I done was a mate of mine who's doing life in Queensland, and I said to my business partner, I said, I'm done. I'm not doing no more of them. I said, that one really got to me because it was a mate, and I got an emotional attachment to it. With the other ones, I just normally disassociate myself from it. As this thing that I can do is disassociate, like I've done in prison. I've seen murders in prison. I disassociated myself from it. I just had no mental attachment to what had happened to it. I was like, I'd seen plenty of stabbings, plenty of violence, and there was this disassociation. It's not healthy to do it. It's not recommended to do it. It's really bad for you. But I disassociated myself. Like I just sat there and numbed myself and pretend it didn't happen. But it did.
Consciously?
Yeah. Consciously just didn't see that, push it out.
But it's still in your memory.
But it's in your subconscious.
Yeah.
And what happens in the subconscious wake you up in the middle of the night, and that's where your nightmares come from.
There's Jiminy Cricket, mate. He's up there doing this above your head about 2 a.m. It's happened to me millions of times. And in fact, it happened to me last night. So, but how do you purge that shit? I mean, like, how do you purge that stuff out of your system?
I do a lot of recovery. I do a lot of, because I'm a former heroin addict, I believe in recovery means Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. I do a lot of one-on-one counselling. I'm starting this treatment. It's called EMDR therapy. The EMDR therapy is more for the prison stuff. Like I've done a lot of trauma counselling, and the trauma counsellors are saying you're really at a good spot with it. But maybe we should start investigating the trauma counselling, the prison trauma that you've got, because this 23 years have been told you're a shitbag and you're a scumbag and by the prison officers themselves. Sort of subconsciously you carry that. Like once again, you disassociate yourself and it gets pushed into subconscious. but it's still there.
Do you ever believe it?
Yeah, for sure.
How'd you make yourself a model citizen following all that belief that you were a shitbag because you've been
I think
told?
that works, isn't it? I think my work is sort of an escapism too. I'm really like, I remember when I got out of prison.
Just a better form though.
Yeah. It's a better form of it. Like, I had a few goals, right? One of my goals was I wanted to buy an AMG Mercedes and a Rolex watch after I'd been out for 3 years. And I just was hell-bent. I was just on that thingy board that you put up, you know what I mean? That's and I wanted to do that. And I was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the only time I'd have an hour off to go to the gym of a morning, and then I'd get straight in. And I was horrible to be around. Like, I just wasn't sociable. I was always on my phone. I was on social media talking to clients or whatever. And that was an escapism. It was an escapism for me through work. I've learned to manage that a lot better these days. I've got 12 staff these days. I'm learning life balances. That's been really hard. But
did you do it? I don't need to know this, but did you learn that from observing anybody else? So
yeah. I do. I look at good businessmen like yourself. I follow everything you do. But. And just watching other successful people don't make it all about the job, you know, and just, you know, because my business acumen's self-learned. I haven't got no really qualifications. I learned from prison officers. If a prison officer, like, whatever if they do something, do it the totally opposite way and you'll get a result. That's what, because they know to fuck everything up, you know what I mean? Well, I'll say corrective services, they're just acting on a directive, them blokes, you know what I mean? It's nothing to do with them personally. They're just acting on a directive. Corrective services can fuck everything up, all right?
The institution called corrective
services. Yeah, they can fuck everything up. They're good at fucking everything up. The things are starting to change in New South Wales in particular because I'm actually doing some work for them now. So as lived experience type person, but going back to the mental stuff about that self-belief, it does come out sometimes. When I'm feeling depressed, it's like the little, as you say, the cricket kicks off and starts clicking his heel, scumbag, shitbag.
But what do you do as a technique when that happens?
Train.
So let's say it happens, I'll tell you what I do, but let's say it happens does it ever happen in the middle of the night?
Oh, that's the worst.
What do you do then? What do you do?
Get up and work.
Yeah, just
get up and get myself, because I'm a poor sleeper. I always have, and I think it's attributed to the first time I was ever abused was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I think that's never left me. But I'm also ADHD. I'm pretty sure I'm self-diagnosed, but everything they say about HDA, I'll tick all the boxes, yeah? But I get up and work, whether it's doing my social media or answering emails or whatever. And there's this time, but say 2 in the morning and 4 in the morning where I'm super duper creative.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the peace and tranquility of that time in the morning. There's no white noise or anything like that. And that nightmare of the thing will wake me up. And it's like it's time to get up and get creative. You got the option, stay in the horrible thought or get up and do something creative.
Correct.
I'll jump up and do something creative.
And what's interesting about that is a lot of business people, especially startups, are up at 3 o'clock in the morning and they say exactly the same thing.
Champions hour, isn't it?
Yeah, totally, mate. Because it might not be a PTSD thing.
Yeah.
It might not be.
Yeah.
But it might be a stress or an anxiety thing that's created by being in business for yourself or having a startup or having a crack, just having a crack. And, you know, you've got some problem that's bugging you from the day before or the week before, and it could be a staff member, it could be a client, it could be a customer, it could be the bank, it could be cash flow, it could be the tax office, it could be anything. But it always comes an itch around that time. And what I hear people say, exactly what you just said, Russell, is they find that if they just lay there and try and wrestle in the mud with it, it fucks them up.
Yeah, it does.
You go nowhere.
I've tried. I've had partners. Any relationship I'm in, I tell people, I say, mate, nothing personal, but I'm out of here at that time of the morning. I might jump back into bed at 4 and get another hour. I said, but I need to do this thing. There's a problem with it. You sort.
I'm up downstairs, workout.
Yeah.
And for me, it's either go and train.
Yeah.
I used this weird thing many years ago where I lived in the city and hopefully, you know, I don't get in trouble for saying this, but across the road from the Botanical Gardens, and the darker the night, the better for me.
Yeah.
And I would actually go and climb over the fence.
I wanted to do that.
And go through the Botanical Gardens.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something really interesting about this. It's locked off to the public, all right?
Yeah.
So I live across. I could climb in and I'd go through the Botanical Gardens, dark forest. I used to love it, right?
Yeah.
And I used to, because every sort of sensory thing in my whole body became aware of what I was doing. And there's dudes in there
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
people
She's like,
sleeping in there.
hopeless, painless. Yeah,
And you don't see them during the day.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't know how the fuck they get in there,
Yeah.
but they're there.
Yeah,
And they scare the shit out of you because they're around the toilets and they're around because it happened. I went into one of the toilets there I needed to have a pee, and there was a dude in there. Like, I fucking shit myself. Like, but it's quite interesting. I used to do that as my thing to actually, and I come back at 4 o'clock and I could go back to sleep for an hour or so. So, and
I've done it too. I used to live on Elizabeth Street near Downing Centre Court, and I used to walk down. And I thought, man, I should jump over that.
No, you're easy to get over. I mean, you're not supposed to, but you're easy to get over. But it was fun. I don't do it anymore. I haven't done it for years, but I used to do it. Like, my partner at the time, she used to think I was crazy.
Yeah.
And I said, no, but the more scary it is, the better for me. To be honest,
it puts you on the edge.
It gets all my, and I used to come back and I'd feel quite relaxed when I got back.
Yeah.
But I used to think about some really good stuff.
You would have been a bank robber in your day, mate. You're a thrill seeker.
Well, I sort of did to push myself, but I agree with you. You've got to get up and do something. So if you've got
100%.
Jiminy Crickle sitting over the top of your head, scratching his heels and trying to fuck you up in the middle of the night, for whatever the anxiety is, get up.
Don't entertain him.
Correct. Brush him. Get up and do something about it. Like write something down, read a book, do something sort of semi-productive. And ride down, and amazing, the thoughts will just disappear, and you can get on with it. And it's another form of escapism. And I think one of the things I want to ask you, Russell, is this: I think you never cure these traumas that you live with for your whole. None of us do for the rest of our lives. Okay, and we never cure anxiety because anxiety is a thing that's always coming our way, no matter what.
Yeah,
and it comes in cycles, but it's going to hit all of us. And maybe we never cure seeking out escapism, whether it's drugs or alcohol or doing crazy shit, like, testing yourself, climbing a mountain or whatever. Or in my case, run through the forest. But maybe what it is we got to seek an escapism that doesn't harm us and be obsessed with that.
And doesn't cost a lot.
Doesn't cost a lot. So in your case, makes you money.
Yeah.
In your case, makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Gives you a good outcome because you're actually being productive for society. You're actually adding something to society.
Yeah. That feels good.
That's a good thing. And so maybe that's escapism still is a solution. It's the style of escapism that 100%. You take.
Well, I start my day off. When I get up at that time, I'm big on gratitude lists, because gratitude lists for me, being grateful is the conduit to peace, being at peace. If I find something, I go, I'm grateful for that. But when I do that gratitude list, I'm aware of that, subconsciously aware of it. So I'll go during the day, I'll say, I'm grateful that I can see. And we'll see something beautiful. I go, man, I'm so glad I saw that. Or I'm gratitude that I'm going to have good food, and that day I'll have a good food and I'll say, man, like I'll have that first mouthful, I'll taste it, I'll absorb it, and I'll, be just really grateful from where the sources that it come from. And I live in a country that we can have the best steak in the world, or the Argentinians will disagree with that. But I just be aware, and I just feel it. Man, gratitude is a really big thing for me.
Well, it's a funny thing you should say that. One of the things most religions talk about, doesn't matter what the religions, can be Buddhism, whatever it is, they all talk about having gratitude. But it's also enjoying things. So one thing that I try to do is make sure I sit down, if I have a cup, some people quickly have a cup of coffee and racing out the door, actually smell the coffee, feel the coffee, taste the coffee, actually spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes, no matter what it is. And these are all processes that, like, I'm finding quite incredible that you're self-taught these things because these are things I've read about and other, people, qualified therapists have told me about what to do. But these are things that you're doing on your own. And again, it's probably through trial and error, but it's also probably through being hyper aware of everything that's going on around you, as opposed to someone like me. I'll go on, you're either reminding me of stuff today or you're telling me stuff that I'm thinking about myself that I might be able to make use of in terms of trying to make my life a little bit better. Because I think everybody at the end of the day is just trying to improve their life just on the margin all the time. Yeah. How I feel, how I enjoy my day, and what's amazing to me is that you don't seem to have much shit on your liver, given that you spent 24 years institutionalized. You were abused when you were younger. no one's
I was
been,
a 1,000,000 to 1 shot, Mark.
no one's been squared off on that. I
No.
mean, like as you said, the blokes, or if they I assume they're blokes, but passed away, dead. You know, being institutionalized is just not a word. It's fucked up because, all right, you did some crimes, you did the robberies, then you've got to come out, you've got to live with the pain of all that. And institutions don't really reform anybody at the end of the day. They just keep you off the street.
Yeah.
They make everybody else feel better.
Yeah.
The coppers don't even really think that. The coppers aren't even, look, at the end of the day, cops are just doing their job, most of them. But they're not, they probably wouldn't agree with it either, in most of them, the ones that I know anyway, because they know it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Would you say it works?
No, it doesn't work. 100% it doesn't work. Well, look, I just think you're just delaying the problem. You know, just putting on ice for a bit. But I think when you go in there, the problem you have, I was just talking to someone on the way down about the problems that it causes. It's like if you put someone in those places and treat them like an animal for 23 years, you can't have an expectation they're going to come out and act like a productive member of society.
Totally.
And in my case, I was like, Professor Ian Call wrote me off as a 1,000,000 to 1 shot at being where I am now. He said, he wrote that in he said that recently on a strange story. And I was 1,000,000 to 1 shot because, man, there wasn't much, I wasn't showing much about empathy and compassion in there. You know, although I've got my organisation is based on empathy and compassion. I ask myself, where does it come from? Because I haven't been shown a lot.
Where does it come from?
I don't know. I think, my passion to help others, and I couldn't have that empathy and compassion. I think I've always had it, Mark. I think I was born with empathy and compassion. I've always been one of those kids where, growing up in Mount Druitt, there's a lot of dysfunctionality, and I'd get me dinner and I'd run outside, and my mate would be sleeping under my house. I'd give him half of my dinner. I was always one of those type of kids. A mate reminded me of it recently. He said, "You remember when I got kicked out of home?" And he said, "And I was sleeping in your bed, and you'd always come in with wipe half your dinner off on the plate and give it to me." And I said, because I could cook. I've been a kid. My parents are like hard work. I'm from. My parents are immigrants from Liverpool, and come out at 65 with 10-pound poms, I'm the youngest of 6. That's a bit of a rarity. And I was always one of those kids I was always showing kindness, and I was always sort of protected by my older brothers and that sort of stuff. So I guess I learned that from the family environment, compassion and decency and that sort of stuff. And but yeah, it is, man. I'll tell you, my accountant doesn't like my compassion and empathy. He reckons it's no good for the bank account. You know what I mean? Because that's what it is.
You don't charge all the time, in other words.
Well, yeah, you get these stories of someone getting out of prison, they've got no clothes or anything like that, and I always believe, and I'm a big shoe person. Right? I've got this massive shoe collection. I've got a couple hundred pairs of shoes, right? Because I think shoes are good for your soul. That's just, you know what I mean? And I'll, first, and in jail, your shoes are like your car. If you've got 2 pairs of shoes, it's like, the better the shoes, it's got a Ferrari or, you got a Porsche or whatever. So we're always big. And I think for blokes coming out of prison, there's a bit of dignity and having a good pair of shoes.
So you help me out with a good pair of shoes?
I'll always go and buy them a good pair of shoes, you know what I mean, to come out with a bit of dignity. That's a funny thing. People don't understand that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but they're the little things that make a difference. And that's probably, they're the sort of things that breaks people down, that allows them to actually feel as though they can come and talk to you. I want to just a shout out now for the name of your business. What's it called?
The Voice of a Survivor. You can see it on Instagram, Voice of a Survivor, Facebook.
And for all those people who might know someone, or in fact, they think they need it for themselves, what would you just say to them now if they're listening to this and they might be just hanging on by the skin of their teeth with whatever their trauma is? It could be something just more recently caused, by business, for example.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I think I'm a big believer in a problem shared is a problem halved. No matter who it is, mate, just go and tell a stranger on the street and let him take off with it. But just get it out. I think, that's where the sickness, don't be as sick as your secrets. Your secrets will keep you sick. Share it with someone. For me, from an abuse a survivor's sort of perspective, don't sit with that stuff, like that stuff that you're sitting with, that guilt, shame, and everything don't belong to you. It doesn't belong to you. Tell someone about it. Because when you tell someone about it, you know what I mean, you're offloading that backpack of guilt and shame. And you're giving it back to its rightful owner. That's the perpetrators themselves. really big on it. I'm really big on it, man. I've got no problem. People say, don't you feel, I tell my story, mate, as much as I can. Anyone want to hear it, I'll tell you. Because if I can inspire one person to come forward and tell their story, man, I've had a good day. You know what I mean? And it's that stuff you talk about, doing good in the community. And man, I've had some really beautiful feedback that's really heartwarming. And that's the sort of stuff that's the thrill I chase these days, not coming out of a bank about to get my head blown off by Roger Rogerson and his crew. And that's who were chasing me like that. I got the tail end of their crew, and they were madmen. And I get my thrill comes from just getting nice feedback from someone that, who I've changed their lives. I can remember one bloke in particular. He was not only being abused, but he was at a boys' home where the pharmaceutical companies were trialing drugs on these kids. And this is in Australia. And people find that hard to believe, but it's known. And he wrote me this thing saying, I've never had a hero in my life. He said, but you're my hero. He said, what you've done for me and for me to sleep at night with ease and you know what I mean, and to sort of have some peace in my life. And I was just sort of blown. I've actually got the text on my phone, and that is a pretty beautiful feeling, man. And I remember last time I went to court, what happened to me was I'd been in jail for 4 years, and I was about to go home. And at 2 weeks to go, I was parole granted. I decided to put myself in a rehab at 4 years clean because I realised I just didn't have a problem with drugs. I had a living problem as well. I needed to get some skills. I needed to know how to pay bills. I needed to learn a little bit about technology. I needed to get some skills, and I thought I'd get it in a rehab. And 2 weeks ago, and I was going to rehab, and the coppers turned up and charged me with 6 old robberies. And bail refused. But by this stage, my compensation claim had come about, and I wasn't far away from getting out. So I could afford good legal representation. And a big shout out, I got a bloke called Peter O'Brien, who's an amazing lawyer. And I got in contact with him. He put a hold on some of my money and he got me representation. And he come up with a plan, and he said, we'll get you out on bail. And I couldn't get bail on shoplifting. I've never been able to get bail, you know what I mean, and anything like that. And he said, we'll get you bail. And I thought, mate, that's a bit ambitious, And he said, we'll get you parole. And he said, we'll get you into rehab. And went before the magistrates court at Central Local, and the magistrate was filthy, saying, you had 4 years to charge this bloke, and you're doing it with 2 weeks to go. Like, he's due to go home. And he said, I'm going to give you bail. And I had money for my compensation, so I could bail myself out. Went to a rehab up in Coffs Harbour. I'd done the program. I got offered the general manager's job on my way out, and they offered me 70 grand a year in a Corolla. I said, I'll give me 700 in a Bentley, and maybe I'll take it. But I always had the intentions of setting up the Voice of the Survivor. I had that from, because what had happened, I'll backtrack a little bit there. I was in jail in Queensland at Maryborough Correctional Centre, and I'm on the telephone. I was talking to the Royal Commission. Now, when you're in a yard, in one of those prison yards, everyone knows, Mark's kid scored fucking 2 tries at the game on Saturday. Everyone knows what you're talking about because you've got 50 blokes in a yard, 2 telephones, and everyone knows what everyone else's business on that phone. And so I could see a couple of people getting a bit suspicious of my phone calls because I was talking to the Royal Commission. So I called a yard meeting. I called them all in. I said, I just want you to know I'm not there talking to the police, because if people think you're talking to the police, it become a very dangerous situation for you. So I'm not talking to the police. I'm actually talking to the Royal Commission about the abuse that happened to me. And, and once again, I got a bit emotional at the time because it was really confronting. And I said, it's got nothing to do with police. It's got nothing to do with that. And you know what? And like within an hour, about 15 blokes had come up to me. The same thing happened to me. How do we go about it? And thanks very much for doing that and bring it to light. By the time I left that jail, I'd helped 65 blokes. And I was getting these notes. You get these notes, and they come in because everything's a little note, and someone will hide it between his arse cheeks and bring it to you and say, here, so they don't. I'm getting these notes come out the Oval. If someone calls you out the Oval, it's normally a fight. I'm getting these, and some big tough guy like the main head would be out there and going, mate, just come for a walk. And I'm going, fucking, we're going to kick off here somewhere, you know what I mean? He goes, just want to tell you it happened to me too. And how do we go about it? And I've had some of the most violent, notorious criminals in jails in Australia. I've been the first port of call from to tell a story of abuse. And then I just go, bang. It's like rewind. It's like going, bang, just going back to the source. Okay, that's what I understand it now. I understand why you are what you are. It was the abuse happening and you become this violent, notorious person,
Russell, you said to me that on odd occasions, especially after you tried to help their mate out recently, it gets to you and you thought, oh, fuck this, I'm going to hang up my gloves. But I think society needs people like you to hang in there.
Mm.
there's a lot of people who really need your help.
Yeah.
And I think that what you've done is nothing short of, well, to be honest, probably the word that comes to me straight up is brilliant. And I don't mean brilliant in intellectual sense. I just mean bright and shiny, really brilliant, like really good stuff.
Yeah.
So keep it up, mate. Russell Manser, thanks very much for coming to me and talking to me.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, mate. Pleasure having you. Pleasure being on here. I've got to get you on mine now.